an honor to follow my sister and of getting to the podium, who I admire very much and very much appreciate. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different tack. I want to start by playing some Babur Bani for you that a friend of mine recorded.
Everyone can hear it? Good.
So obviously, Babur Bani by Guru Nanak is quite far historically from Banda Singh Bahadur. But I'll get back to this at the end of my presentation. When I look at Guru Nanak Dev Ji and Banda Ji, two of the things that I see that link both of them is that both were revolutionaries, in that they overthrew systems that were unjust, and both of them were activists, right? I mean, Guru Nanak walked from Sri Lanka to China to Arabia. That's an activist. That's not someone who sat on his couch, right? That's someone who got up, and he was our role model. So I've taken Guru Nanak Dev Ji's example very much to heart and much of my life. I've dedicated my work to looking at Sikh history as well as the discrimination that Sikhs face in this country. And I'm working on a project right now called the National Sikh American Discrimination and Hate Crime Survey. Now, as Virji said, I'm a scholar, an educator, and an activist. My work is focused on racial and religious discrimination in United States history. I teach US history, but I've spent my career creating the field of Sikh American studies. Because even though we've been here for over a century, we've done a poor job of cataloging our history and teaching other people who we are and what we've accomplished in our time here. So this project is the first scholarly analysis of discrimination and hate violence against Sikh Americans, and it's the first study to focus on Sikh adults. Just tell you a little bit about myself. I've earned 3 degrees from UC Berkeley, concluding with a master's and PhD in comparative ethnic studies. And I've taught history and ethnic studies at several universities in California, including UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC Irvine, and Cal State East Bay. And I also held the Jaideep Singh Sabharwal Chair in Sikh and Punjabi Studies at Cal State East Bay from 2009 to 2012. In addition, I was one of the co-founders of SALDEF, which is the only Sikh American civil rights group that existed prior to 9/11. And so it's actually, we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year, so I've been doing this for most of my life. Now, as I mentioned, Sikhs have been in the United States for well over a century. Right? We have newspaper articles that talk about the first Sikhs arriving as early as 1898, 1899, so not even in the 20th century, the 19th century. And there are earlier Sikhs that came, we just don't have good documentation. So, in that time period, we've accomplished a great deal. I mean, look around the room, look around the country. Sikhs are doing things now that we couldn't have imagined. The other co-founder of SALDEF, Jaideep Singh, was just named by President Obama to an Asian American task force. When we started SALDEF, we couldn't have even imagined that would happen. So, with all of our progress, with all the things we've accomplished because of our sacrifices and our values, one thing has essentially remained unchanged for almost 120 years. And that's our vulnerability to discrimination and hate violence in this country. And these attacks, these hate attacks and this racism, it's frequent. We see the stories over and over again and again, they're recurrent. But outside of our community, it really draws very little attention. It doesn't keep the mainstream's attention for very long. Look at how Oak Creek, the massacre at our Gurdwara in August of 2012, and Balbir Singh Sodhi, who was murdered for being a Sikh 4 days after 9/11, how they've essentially been forgotten by everybody except us. Most disturbingly, things are not getting better. What I want to do is talk to you about the worst period for Sikh Americans since 9/11 that occurred at the end of last year. On November 6th, Jaideep Singh, a Sikh American bus driver in Los Angeles, was attacked while driving a city bus by one of his passengers, who called him a suicide bomber and a terrorist. He also accused the Sardar of hijacking the bus. The vicious attack left Mr. Singh with a swollen and bruised face and jaw and an eye infection. On December 2nd, now ironically, December 2nd, I was giving a lecture in Santa Clara. We were commemorating the first ever Sikh Awareness and Appreciation Month in California. So after 120 years, California is recognizing us. Earlier that day, my dear friend and sister, Valerie Gore, she's a national interfaith leader, a filmmaker, a lawyer, and an activist who's employed by Stanford. You may have seen her on MSNBC. She's been on the Melissa Harry Parrish show a couple times. She was on a flight home from a meeting of national interfaith leaders, and she was on the plane when she was angrily confronted by a white man. After, she removed the tag from her already screened bag. In the end, the young Sikh American mother was forced to reveal her breast pump to prove that she was not a terrorist. December 9th, Gyan Singh, a 78-year-old Sikh American man who I had the honor of meeting about 2 months ago. Small man. He was picking up his grandchild, at elementary school in Bakersfield, California, when he was struck on the turban by an apple that somebody had thrown from a car. The fruit was thrown with such force that it shattered upon hitting his pagadi, leaving the elder with pain and dizziness. If it had been an inch lower, it could have broken his face. 2 days later, 12-year-old Arman Singh Sarai, born and raised in Texas, was handcuffed, suspended from school, and spent 3 days in a juvenile facility away from his parents in Arlington, Texas, because another student accused him of having a bomb in his backpack. Now, Arman, who has undergone 3 open-heart surgeries, was kept in jail, essentially, without his parents being told where his whereabouts. The Sikh boy insists that he's innocent, and the episode resulted from another boy falsely accusing him, essentially a form of bullying. The incident graphically illustrates how even our children are unsafe in this racist atmosphere in which we live. On December 13th, a Sikh man working as a store clerk in Grand Rapids, Michigan, was shot in the face. His assailant, who first called him a terrorist, also said he used to kill people like him in Iraq. And he also said he was a member of the Islamic State. December 15th, Simkor Sangha from Fremont, California, very close to my home, was questioned by police at her house after asking about ammunition at a local sporting goods store. She didn't even buy the ammo, she just asked about it. Said Miss Sangha, a firearms instructor, who's preparing to become the first Sikh woman to join the Los Angeles police, they singled me out because of the way that I look. I've had friends buy bulk ammo, and they've never had police show up at their door. The same week, a video of a Sikh American elderly man from California sleeping on a plane was posted on YouTube with the caption, "Would you feel safe flying with bin Laden?" The day after Christmas, 68-year-old Sikh American farm worker Amrit Singh Bal was attacked by 2 men in Fresno, California, while he was waiting for a ride to work in the pre-dawn fog. His assailants hit Mr. Bal with their car as he tried to escape. As they attacked him, one of them yelled, "Why are you here?" Mr. Bal suffered abrasions to the nose and hand and a broken collarbone, and stitches on his ear and the back of his head. The attackers were recently caught, but their capture doesn't solve our bigger problem. This is hardly an isolated incident. Then on New Year's Day, Gurcharan Singh Gill, also 68, also in Fresno, was stabbed to death at the convenience store in which he worked. It was our state's first homicide of 2016. Now, these are essentially the incidents from just 1 month. And they do not include the far greater number of incidents that are not reported. The vast majority of hate crimes are not reported. That's something we need to change as a community. Now, the end of 2015 was the worst time for such open racism since 9/11, as I mentioned, because of the intolerance coming from conservative politicians, the media, and even some Christian religious leaders. Because of this venomous rhetoric, the attacks on Sikhs continue, sometimes committed by average citizens and law enforcement officials. On February 20th, 30-year-old Jaideep Singh and another man were arrested while riding on a Greyhound bus on suspicion of making terrorist threats. A fellow passenger claimed that she heard them discussing a bomb and quote-unquote acting weird. Mr. Singh was detained by police in Amarillo, Texas for 30 hours before being released without any charges being filed, and after he was questioned by the FBI. Now, Jaideep Singh speaks very little English, and he explained that he was speaking on the phone with his friends and family in Punjabi when he encountered another Punjabi-speaking passenger, a Pakistani man. Obviously, the two sat together to give each other company. When they reached Amarillo, several passengers began regarding him with suspicion and behaving aggressively and taking photographs of Jaideep. Soon after the bus departed, two passengers restrained him in his seat until the police arrived. Now, Jaideep Singh is a political asylee. He had just been released the day before the incident. So, after surviving torture and the possibility of death in India, then spending a month in an immigration detention center in Arizona, he was nonetheless treated like a common criminal and a threat, all because of his visible Sikh American identity. He explains, the only crime that I committed was wearing a turban, having a beard, and speaking in a different language to another brown man on a bus. He was traumatized and humiliated by these events, which were widely reported by local media in stories that included a mugshot of him without his turban. Now, I don't need to tell any of you what a great insult that is. The list goes on and on. I mean, I could literally stay here all day reciting events that have been occurring. The point is, it's a huge problem and it's not improving, and any one of us could be next. I mean, in February, the famous actor Waris Ahluwalia was prevented from boarding a flight to New York City. The previous month, a Sikh man was among 4 who filed a lawsuit after being removed from a plane from Toronto to New York City because of their appearance. On March 26th, a Sikh man in Quebec, Canada, was punched and kicked repeatedly as his turban flew off during an attack which police refused to label a hate crime. On April 4th, an elderly Sikh couple, 70 and 69, in Fresno, were attacked, and left bloodied during a robbery in Fresno. Again, the police say it wasn't a hate crime. We even have difficulty exercising our basic religious freedom because Sikhs cannot join the armed forces and police departments freely with their religious appearance intact. Throughout the country, for many years, Sikh congregations have faced misguided resistance to efforts to build gurdwaras. This past February, construction of a $3 million gurdwara in Long Island, New York was halted because of resistance from the neighbors. Now, if any of you are familiar with the Plainview Gurdwara, it's been there more than 30 years. This isn't something that just showed up. The hatred and discrimination against Sikh Americans is quite literally everywhere, and it is not improving. So we, as Sikhs, followers of the Guru, have a duty to change our failed approach. Now, if you look at the data, the places where attacks on Sikhs are most common aren't where there are very few Sikhs. You know, the middle of Nebraska, right? Or central Texas, far away from Sikh congregations. Arizona, necessarily. The places where there are the most attacks on Sikhs are where Sikhs are most populous. California and New York. So clearly, just having a large population of Sikhs doesn't keep us safe. Now, I know the community here knows that very well. For the last 15 years, you've seen an unending stream of attacks from West Sacramento. There was a cab driver attacked here, to a Sikh veteran of Iraq who was killed on his front lawn by police, to 2 elderly men who were killed in Elk Grove on a walk. Right, so it's constant. So clearly not having a large population isn't enough to keep us safe. So what we need to do is try a different approach. To compel the government and law enforcement officials to finally take this issue seriously, the Sikh American community needs quantitative and qualitative data, both numbers and stories, to demonstrate the extent of our current problems with hatred and bigotry. When we meet with policymakers, with politicians, with school leaders, with police officers, they ask us for data. We don't have any. That is how things are done in this country. Data, statistical data, will facilitate the inclusion of Sikh concerns into national discussions of discrimination and hate violence. This study will produce the evidence needed to push for measures that decrease hate violence instead of just counting the victims. Because last year we had a big success. Several Sikh civil rights groups, including Sikh Coalition, SALDEF, local groups, Gurdwaras, we got the FBI to recognize Sikhs as an independent category for hate crimes. There's a problem with that. It's not going to solve our problem. All we're doing is counting the victims. We have to intervene before. Otherwise, nothing's going to change. So the laws against hate crimes are focused on punishment instead of prevention. That's the key. So to spare future generations this traumatic inheritance, we must develop a different strategy and transform the terms of this debate. This study will analyze data from a written survey completed by at least 500 community members at each research site. The survey documents various forms of discrimination as well as hate violence. It also records demographic factors from each individual who fills out the survey: age, income, education, as well as if they wear a turban or the star. These are all important factors that we need to isolate and understand so that we can convey to thought leaders as well as politicians which Sikhs are most vulnerable. Now, we tend to know, but we don't have the evidence. In the pilot project in Seattle, I've already had 525 people fill out the hand-filled surveys. Now, I need to add to this numerical data with stories, voices, because numbers are for policy wonks. If we want Americans to change their minds and understand the problems that our community faces, they need to hear our voices. They need to see Sikh faces talking about what we encounter. That's what I'm going back to collect, and that's what I need help with. So, as I said, the first study was in Seattle. If I can complete this study, once it's published, I'm hopeful that a national foundation will allow me to complete a second study with at least 1,000 people in the Central Valley from Yuba City to Bakersfield. Because as we've seen in the last year, this may be the worst place in America to live for a Sikh American in terms of danger. Now, this study will transform the debate with a scholarly report that will be distributed to every member of Congress as well as media thought leaders. The data will also be disseminated in conjunction with all other Sikh groups, United Sikhs, Chakara, Sikh Coalition, through op-eds and major media sources. Once we have the data, that's just the beginning. Then the entire Sikh community has to work to get it out, because we've needed this for 110 years. Once we have it, we all need to work together. It's a community effort. Now, I have 4 primary goals. The first is to collect the data. Okay? Reliable documentation of discrimination will allow Sikhs to access government resources for which our tax dollars pay, unlike in India, right? The Supreme Court of India said that what happened in Punjab, which Banji referred to, was worse than a genocide. But we don't have any realistic hope of justice there, do we? Any more than we do of all the people who are named and who are the guilty. They got away with it. This is different. The way we access government resources is by collecting this type of data. We have to follow the examples of African Americans and Jewish Americans. White people didn't count the black people they lynched. Black people risked their lives to get those numbers. Just the way Jaswant Singh Kalwar did, just the way Jalil Andrabi did. So, the second goal is to preserve Sikh history. I mentioned already, we've done a very poor job of doing this. That's why, and one of the reasons our history is so poorly written is we've allowed other people to write our history. That has to change. Now the goal ultimately is to prevent bias and hate crimes. That's why I'm going about collecting all this data. That's the first step. All the other steps can't happen without that first step though, so that's why I need your support. Finally, this is the most important thing for everyone here, please listen. We have to change the way we behave. We have to develop a culture of reporting all discrimination and hate violence. If you look at the data for the last 30 years, it is the Jewish Americans are the ones most affected by violence and hate violence and discrimination. We know that's not true, particularly since 9/11. The difference is, jo kuch hunda hai unno, koi choti moti cheez, they report it. Every Jewish organization gets on board and they say a Jew has been attacked, every Jew's been attacked. We're not that advanced yet. We need to move forward as a community together. Otherwise, it's not going to change. It's really that simple. Just because you're a big, strong man, it's your duty to your community that if we don't report these issues, we don't have a voice. So, so also statistically speaking, if you don't report the small incidents, eventually a big incident will occur. It's just statistics. This is my pilot project's budget. I'm happy to talk to you about it. I've raised about $25,000, need another $27,000. I'm happy to show you all the data as well as the receipts. Any donation you make will go through the Sikh American Legal Defense Education Fund, SALDEF, and it will be tax deductible. So, the reason I played the Babur Bani at the beginning was when you look at Guru Nanak, and I guess Bandaji very much falls into this category. When he wrote Babur Bani, it was very difficult. The easy thing for anybody when they see injustice is to look the other way. Right? Our Kara, our Kirpan reminds us that we have a duty not to do that. Bandaji didn't look the other way. He laid the basis for the Khalsa Raj. All of us have a small duty and a role to play in this as well. That's why I ask your support, no matter how small your donation. Please, seek the truth and support this effort, because too many generations of our children have suffered. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.